Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde here with Shooter Hunt, bringing you another episode of Coffee and Curveballs. We're continuing our look at the 2018 recruiting classes, and we're wrapping up the Power 5 with the Pac-12.
The Conference of Champions. Finally, the West Coast getting their due. They've been sitting through a lot of these teams east of the Rockies, but as always, the Pac-12 is loaded.
It is. West Coast baseball has its reputation across the country as being obviously very talented. So we're looking at a lot of very loaded classes today. And what a great way to start in looking at the Arizona Wildcats, because this class is next level from my view.
For sure. I mean, right at the top, two guys that you love. Matthew Liberatore is at the top of our Draft 100, so probably not getting to campus, unfortunately. But if he does, you're looking at that Friday night starter right away.
Yeah. He could arguably compete for that Friday night spot right now. But yeah, Liberatore, top guy in the PBR Draft 100 currently. Big projectable left-hander. Average to better stuff across the board. Commands all of it. This guy's going to be a top 10 pick, maybe even a top 5 pick. So Arizona's not going to get him, nor do I see them getting Nolan Gorman, an infielder with big-time raw power. There's some swing and miss tendencies in there because kind of an uphill path, but when he connects, ball travels further than a lot of balls I've seen off the bat of a high school player. There's another tier of draft prospects that Arizona has committed, and those are the kind of guys where I've said it a few times that I'm on the fence about. It remains to be seen which way they're going to fall, is going into pro ball or going to campus. But Austin Wells is a left-handed hitting catcher out of Nevada. He's got some power in there. Good defender behind the plate. There's a lot to like about him. I could see him, going top 3 rounds and jumping into pro ball right away. Ian Mejia is a right-hander out of the state of Arizona. Real projectable guy with an electric arm. He's somebody that I think scouts could fall in love with pretty easily if he, puts together a good spring. So, the Wildcats might be sweating that one out a little bit. Randy Abshir, left-hander out of California. I can see him getting to campus, kind of a funky lefty, skinny kid. Tony Bullard, third baseman from California, tall, long, projectable frames, got some projectable power. Could see him going either way. Some of those California guys, someone always jumps up in the spring, and Bullard, who knows, maybe he's the guy out there this year. But if they can get him on campus, obviously that's a pretty big bat. And then one other guy I want to mention, before Shooter, you take a couple guys, is Bryce Collins. Saw him at area code games. It's a funky delivery, up tempo, but it's 90-92, and it's an 11.5 curveball with depth. He really spins it well. So even though, Arizona's going to, lose out on Liberatore and Gorman most likely, and then maybe a couple other guys, there's still a lot of depth to this class that I really like.
For sure, and just to mention, recruiting coordinator Sergio Brown, saw him all over the place last summer, and he was at the forefront of these West Coast Pac-12 teams coming out to the future games. He was kind of finding pockets all over the country, and you see it in Ryan Archibald, who's a third baseman from Maryland. Then they got Tyler Casagrande, an outfielder from Virginia. So they're not just sticking to Arizona, although obviously with the talent in the state and in Southern California nearby, that's where they're going to get most of their players. But, even on their roster now, you got kids from Pennsylvania. They're just trying to find the best guys, and that's why they've been so successful. And, Serge is down the road constantly and does a great job there.
Speaking of success, another program within the state, obviously the Arizona State Sun Devils, are a storied program in college baseball. They're looking at a pretty solid class here. Some in-state talent as well as, 4 corners kind of coming from the region as well as Southern California. They pull a guy from Iowa in Connor Vanskoy.
Yes.
Spencer Vanskoy was an Arizona State recruit, left-hander out of Iowa a couple of years ago. Connor's the younger brother. Projectable right-hander. Be interesting to see, if he gets on campus, what that staff can do developing him. But for me, a couple of the key guys are like right-hander Chase Webster. He was 87-92 at the area code games. It's a real running fastball. He's got hard run to a changeup. Kind of varies the breaking ball. But interesting, right-handed arm that they could get. Dustin Garcia is an outfielder from Washington. He's got loose hands at the plate. Flashed some hardline drives at area code games last year, so nice little player, for the Sun Devils to pick up. But for me, the guy that I really like is Sasha Snyder. He's a left-hander out of Arizona, 86 to 88, some arm side sink, advanced feel for the changeup, fade and sink, but it really comes out of his sleeve. It's really hard to pick up. I remember watching him in Long Beach and be like, this guy can pitch at college like right now. It's not big stuff, but he was getting out, making weak contact because it was hard to pick up, solid stuff. So I think that's a really good guy to keep an eye on for Arizona State.
And then catching him is going to be a kid named Luke Leisering out of Colorado. Long, athletic frame, broad shoulders, switch hitting catcher, just very in control, and a guy who I think could make a jump once he gets on campus with the help of the coaching staff. I know Ben Greenspan, their recruiter, is just a guy that I really enjoy sitting next to and picking his brain about stuff on the West Coast, but he also gets out, and he's at the future games in the Midwest, East Coast, wherever he's at. Arizona State's a national program and has that allure. So, and then coming behind the 19 class, no, we're not there yet, but that's looking pretty good for them too. Indeed.
So heading to the far West Coast now and a little north, we head to Berkeley and we look at recruiting class for California. Cal's had, it's been an interesting few years for them. There was a point where, there was talk of the program being shut down. But they raised money and they, really went on a campaign and saved that program. And then their head coach, moves over and slides over into the open spot at Stanford. So they got new head coach there, Mike New. For me, the top guy is Dominic Pipkin. And he's the top prospect in Northern California. So they're going to be sweating that one out for sure because this guy's up to 96, sits in the low 90s, obviously touches the mid 90s. Real long, athletic frame, projectable. If they can get him on campus, it changes the landscape for this class. But the chances of him getting on campus right now, I think, are relatively low because of his status as a draft prospect.
Well, if he does get to campus, Coach New's a guy I sat next to when I was at the in NorCal for a tournament at the end of October. Just a guy you'd really want to play for. Just real calm, confident. I think he's going to do an awesome job there in Berkeley. But similarly to Pipkin, two other arms in this class that are big physical guys. They seem to have those big, long right-handers. But a kid named Grant Holman is a right-handed pitcher, big physical, 6'6", 210 right-hander with that arm strength. Developing secondary stuff. But the tools are there and just that raw physical ability to work with. And then another one is a kid named Ian Villers. Same. Broad shoulders, thick. I watched him throw. It comes out hot. The secondary's still coming along, but the arm strength is there, so there's something to work with. And with those arms, you're going to need arms to compete in that Pac-12.
And then you also have Joe Amarato from California. They picked him up late. Secondary stuff's still in development, but there's some funk in that delivery. But it's a firm low 90s fastball. So obviously, picking up any arm, that can find the low 90s late in the game, is obviously an asset to be had. But moving on, heading even more up the West Coast, into Eugene, we look at Oregon, Coach Horton and his staff bringing in a solid group. The top guy is Vinny Tosti. He's from Northern California, and it's actually kind of an interesting story now, an unfortunate story. But he was at Cardinal Newman in Northern California, kind of a little inland from the Bay Area. But now he's at Mater Dei, and he transferred under the hardship rules because the baseball field at Cardinal Newman was destroyed in a fire.
Wow.
So Tosti now obviously heading south, play at Mater Dei. Incredible program down there, so...
Yes, it is.
Very good opportunity for him, but also, unfortunate circumstances. But as a player, he's a line drive hitter, strong kid. He can run. He's really athletic. He's going to get some looks at the draft, especially now being at Mater Dei. Nothing against Cardinal Newman. Good program up there, obviously producing a kid like Tosti. But Mater Dei gets a lot of attention being, in Southern California, in kind of that Orange County, LA County area. But they also have Amelia Rosas on that team, who we'll talk about a little bit later. So he's going to get plenty of looks, from scouts. So whether they hang on to him is going to be a big question. But, this guy, he's built for college baseball, so it would be a great recruit to get on campus for Oregon.
For sure, and then his matter-day teammate, Maxwell Foxcroft, is a kid that we saw last year at the Boris Classic. Just a tough, small or shorter stature, but gets in the box and is very confident. That seems to be what Coach Horton brings in, guys who can, work the barrel, move the ball around, run, play defense well behind the great pitching staff. And Coach Dietrich up there has been doing a great job with that staff, and they always have arms rolling out there. But two guys I want to talk about real quick are the catchers that they're bringing in. James Bell, more of a physical guy, catch and throw, thicker 200-pound type kid who could have a chance as soon as he gets on campus to play right away. And then Cameron Barstead is a little bit longer, and I don't want to say longer and leaner. It's still very athletic, maybe a little more projectable than Bell. But those are two catchers that Oregon's going to really like. I know Coach Horton likes to have those good catchers behind the plate, catching the stud arms that they keep rolling out.
Looking at the other side of the Civil War, heading over to Corvallis with Oregon State, Jacob Pfennigs is a right-hander coming out of Idaho to the Beavers. Real long and skinny right-handed arm. Was at one point committed to Arizona State. He's got some pretty decent feel for his stuff in there. Maybe didn't progress like guys thought he would, but if he can get to campus and work with Coach Nate Yeske, obviously he could turn into a pretty good arm for the Beavers. But then one other guy that I want to kind of mention is first baseman Andrew Walling. He takes aggressive hacks at the plate. He's got good bat speed. Bat stays in the zone. He's got that strong top hand. The ball really jumps off his bat. So, that could be, obviously a big-time offensive guy to bring into Corvallis. But, Shooter, tell us about Jake Ducart, a guy that's committed for football, but obviously can do some things on the diamond as well.
For sure. Yes, committed for football, just a great athlete. I watched him play a couple times last year in the Oregon State playoffs, but just can do it all. I think I watched him pitch, play shortstop, just moves around, can really run, has a good approach at the plate. But, I can't stress it enough. Coach Casey, Coach Bailey, Coach Yeske, they just develop guys. And Oregon State is an SEC program in the Pac-12, meaning they get after it at the plate, and they have some big power arms that they run out there, and that's why they've been so successful. I really can't say enough about the developmental stuff. They get a lot of kids that fit their mold, those blue-collar types who really work hard, and that's why it's been a special program for so long. And when you got Coach Casey leading the charge, you're going to be good.
We turn around, head down the Pacific Coast Highway into kind of that Hollywood region, looking at Southern California, the USC Trojans. Preston Hartzell is one of the top guys in this class. Outfielder, left-handed hitter, big power. He's won some home run derbies this summer. There is some swing and miss in there as he kind of sells out for that power a lot. But he's a solid runner and really strong kid. He's the kind of guy that can come in right away as a freshman and do some absolute damage at the plate. But then a guy that I really like is Chandler Champlain. It's a really good arm, 87 to 91, good breaking ball, big, strong body. This guy is going to be really good. He's got a chance to blow up in the spring, which would be bad for the Trojans because if he does blow up in the spring, he probably is going to find his way into pro ball.
Yeah, definitely, and that's an issue that USC's had to run into for a while now. It's guys signing. It happens with kids in Southern California. The weather's so good, scouts get to see them so much that signability becomes easier because they have enough track record to give a kid a certain amount of money. But that's a huge issue, and I think that's why we saw Coach Matt Curtis, recruiting coordinator, out at the Future Games, just kind of checking out the talent. It is a private school, which some people outside of the SoCal and West Coast area may not know. USC is a private school, so they're kind of recruiting nationally, although trying to keep that amazing talent in SoCal there. But another one that we both like, Emilio Rosas, is just he has a chance to be one of those guys that signs because has a chance to be a special infielder. He could move over to third, but he's a great shortstop right now. Takes big hacks and gets all of it. We saw him hit home run, triple at the Boris Classic last year. I know you love him.
Yeah, he's definitely a really good player and a good pickup for the Trojans, a guy that I can see getting to campus and being an impact player for 3 years and developing into a better pick, down the road.
For sure. And one more, I just want to throw Ethan Reed, big right-hander we saw last year again, but a lot of helium starting to blow up with him. It's a big physical right-hander. They're going to see him a lot in that SoCal area, so he could be one they could be sweating out in June too.
Indeed. Then at Stanford, you got the new staff there. Obviously, after Coach Mark Marquess retired, after a legendary career there, David Esker comes over from Cal. They've got a solid class coming in here, and right at the top is a guy that I absolutely love watching play, and that's Brandon Dieter. Legitimate two-way guy. I mean, this guy can swing it. He's a good defender at shortstop, but then he gets on the mound and can pitches in the high 80s and just really battles and competes out there. I mean, this is the kind of guy that every college coach across the country wants in their recruiting class. He's going to get some attention on the draft side. Stanford always gets their guys. So I see Dieter getting onto campus and just, being a big-time player for the Cardinal for 3 years.
For sure. And Stanford's a national program. They're going to have to go out because the academics are so stringent. It's tough to get kids into school. You got to get a kid who's really good at baseball because Stanford is one of, those top 10 programs that people know about in baseball. Again, we talked about jerseys recently. That Stanford jersey might be the best one too.
That's a pretty good one. It's got the classic, it's basic, but it's good. Like, you don't mess with that jersey.
Yeah, for sure. And I know Coach Thomas Eagert's been, all over the country looking for guys, but they've really done a good job of keeping these kids in California. They're getting down to SoCal, keeping the kids in NorCal, on campus in Palo Alto. But it's one of those historic programs that's going to attract players always. And you had a couple more that you want to talk about because these California kids are really good.
They are. Cody Jensen, obviously in 89, 91, breaking ball still in development, but the body's, pretty projectable. Looking at the rest of the class, Alexander Williams, Vincent Martinez, like we said, Stanford gets these guys. They're known quantities in high school, but they almost always end up on campus. I think in the years that I've been doing this, since, starting at Baseball America out of college, now with Prep Baseball Report, so looking at 10 years now, I'm pretty sure I can still count on one hand the number of guys that have been Stanford recruits that have signed into pro ball. And, we talk about Florida and Vanderbilt, getting their guys on campus. In Virginia, they all lose, one or two guys a year. And in the last 10 years, there's probably less than 5 Stanford recruits that I can remember that have signed. So that's pretty big time for their program and getting that talent to campus.
Wow.
But UCLA, next up in our talk on the 2018 recruiting classes. Quick story, when I was first starting out and going to events and watching players and kind of learning, the whole idea of scouting and projecting and what you're looking at, someone told me if you're at an event, you're at a game, and you're watching a player and you think you like him, and you look down at your sheet and he's committed to UCLA, you like him. Coach John Savage is one of the best evaluators in the country. They were national champions in 2013, I believe it was. And he just, continues to get talent onto campus and gets the most out of his players. He gets guys on campus that you're like, oh, yeah, he's a solid guy, and he turns into a star, for the Bruins for a few years. So definitely looking at that being a repeating theme, especially with this class. For me, one of my favorites is Jake Moberg. He's a shortstop, can really swing the bat. He's got loose hands at the plate, uses the whole field, gap-to-gap guy. Solid defender out there at shortstop. But he can get on the mound, too, and contribute there. Whether he's a two-way guy for the Bruins, that remains to be seen. That's going to be up to Coach Savage and his staff. But Moberg, is a very, very good player. Going to get some draft attention, but I could see him ending up on campus. Cole Roederer, left-handed hitter, outfielder. He can really swing it. He's going to be an interesting guy to watch. But then also Matt McClain. I mean, it's hard not to like Matt McClain. We talk about the Nick Madrigals of the world, Nick Allen, who was a high pick last year. Matt McClain's kind of in that same mold. Smaller guy, but can really play the game. Does everything well. Has a little bit of pop in there, even though it's a smaller frame. But you watch this guy play, and he's got UCLA star written all over him.
For sure. And then one of my favorite players, even since last spring, is a kid named Michael Perez. And I've said it time and time again. Son of his dad's a coach, his mom's a softball coach at UCLA. Just a heady player, takes absolute hacks. He takes hacks like he's playing in small ball yards. And usually you don't see that out in SoCal, where it's more of the Southeast where those guys are hitting those home runs. But Perez does not get cheated, and he plays the game at the 100%, 100 miles an hour at all times. And just Perez, Moberg, McLean, you just are going to want to get out to the yard during BP because they're going to be getting after it in the infield, be getting after it in BP, and then the game will start and it'll just get to another level. They're going to be fun guys to watch there, and it's going to help UCLA continue this championship run.
Next up, we've got the Utah Utes. Shooter, I'm going to let you take this one. I think, if you look at the ballpark, they've got a pretty good selling point when it comes to recruiting right off the bat there.
Oh, for sure. Just the setting that they have at Utah, it's so nice. It's up in the I guess it's in the mountains.
It's in the mountains.
No, I was gonna say hills, but in the mountains, it's just gorgeous going there. And then the ball kind of flies out there, which really helps things out. But one of the pitchers that I want to talk about is a kid named Jay Onken. He's from Colorado, been up to 89. It's one of those guys with a long arm swing, steps across his body, but that coaching staff can get something out of him. He could turn into one of those weekend type guys. But they've done a great job at Utah, where they won the Pac-12 a couple of years ago now. But it's not easy to do. You're going against these SoCal teams where they're stacked with all this talent. These youth system coming up. So Utah's had to go outside, get some kids from Arizona, from California, Colorado. But they've done a really nice job bringing them in and competing in that Pac-12.
Indeed. Heading up to the Pacific Northwest, looking at UW, University of Washington, the Huskies.
UW.
There's two guys I want to point out in this class, and they're arms. And I think if they get both of these guys on campus, it could be a game changer for the Huskies. The top guy is Jason Schroeder. He's out of Washington, and he's a dude. He was at area code games and was really good there. I mean, that event was loaded with pitchers. Yeah. He was 90-93, touched 94. It's a heavy fastball through a sinking changeup. His slider's flat, but it's hard. And he got swings and misses on all of his pitches. And he was one of those guys that, by the end of his second outing, I was looking down at my notes and I was like, man, I really like this guy. And so Washington obviously, got a really good arm in that. He's the top prospect in the Pacific Northwest this year, so there's going to be a lot of heat. The top high school prospect, at least. So there's going to be a lot of heat on him throughout the spring. So we'll see how that works out for Washington come June. But then one other guy I'll mention is David Rhodes, a right-hander out of British Columbia. Pitches in the high 80s. Kind of has that Tim Lincecum gather. He is not Tim Lincecum. Don't misconstrue my words there. But he kind of has that look to him in the delivery, at least in the beginning. Good feel for a secondary stuff in a breaking ball with depth. So definitely, an interesting arm there. And if UW can pick up both those guys, it'd be a big win for them.
For sure. And then the guy they're going to be throwing to is Albert Schall, a kid from California, physical, some pop in the bat. But again, getting back to Schroeder, if they can get Schroeder on campus, that's one we've talked about, some program changers. That's going to help them. You're talking about a future frontline ace on the mound, getting him there. And the one thing we talk a lot about, the Southeast, the East Coast, and the Midwest. Washington has a ton of talent. And a lot of times it gets overlooked because California is stacked with so much talent, and Arizona has the great weather and such good players. But there's a lot of good players up in Washington, and, they're doing a good job of keeping them at home. And if they can keep Schroeder, it's going to do a lot for that program.
Yeah, it'll be big time. Heading all the way across the big state of Washington over to Spokane, we got the Washington State Cougars. They're going to wrap up the Pac-12 for us here. For me, Kobe Blunt is an outfielder, kind of an athletic kid, a really interesting recruit for them. Hit a couple doubles at the area code games, used the whole field. So he's an interesting bat to bring in. And then Sam Lauderdale is a left-hander out of Washington as well. Pitches in the mid-80s. It's from a three-quarter slot, so it's a little bit of a tough look. But that's obviously, a good college arm that Washington State can bring in to try to, compete with some of those bats that they're going to be facing in the conference.
For sure, and they got a lot of projectable guys here. Bradley Polinsky's a switch-hitting catcher from California. You got a kid from Washington who's a three-sport player with a quarterback, Peyton Flynn, probably a corner infielder, another one from Washington. But one that's fun is Brandon Lees, son of head coach Marty Lees, is going to be head there. And it's got to be fun to coach their son. And when he's a 6'3", good-looking athlete, and you can get a lot out of him, that helps too.
It certainly does. So that's your look at the Pac-12 and their 2018 recruiting classes. We hope you all enjoyed it. Next up, we've got a look at mid-majors. And it's hard to call them mid-majors, so non-Power 5 conference teams. Because a lot of these programs, even though they're not in a Power 5 conference, they're still powerful baseball programs.
Yes, they are.
So they'll be next up on Coffee and Curveballs. Appreciate you all joining us today. I'm Nathan Rohde. He's Shooter Hunt. This is Coffee and Curveballs, and we'll see you guys at the ballpark.